I threw away a six-figure salary and my entire career to protect my sister from our boss. But what happened next proved that sometimes the universe has a bigger plan. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Picture this. I'm standing in my corner office on the 47th floor of downtown Seattle's most prestigious tech building, holding my resignation letter with hands that won't stop shaking. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I can see the Space Needle gleaming. In the afternoon sun, the same view I'd admired every morning for 7 years while building what I thought was my dream career. My name is Tobias Chen, and at 32, I was the youngest senior marketing director in Nexus Digital's history. Six-figure salary, stock options worth more than most people's houses. Respect from colleagues who once saw me as just another ambitious kid from the wrong side of town. I had everything I'd worked my entire adult life to achieve. But none of that mattered anymore, because 20 floors below me, in a cramped cubicle surrounded by fake motivational posters, my 28-year-old sister Celeste was crying in the bathroom for the third time that week. Not because she couldn't handle the workload of being a junior analyst. Not because she missed our parents, though God knows we both still do after losing them 4 years ago in that car accident that changed everything. She was crying because Vincent Harwick, our 45-year-old department head with his perfectly pressed suits and predatory smile, had cornered her again. This time he'd made it clear that her future at the company depended on how accommodating she was willing to be during their private meetings. The resignation letter in my hands represented a choice I never thought I'd have to make. Keep the career I'd sacrificed everything to build, or protect the only family I had left from a man who saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. Most people would tell you to work within the system, file a complaint, trust that justice would prevail. But here's what most people don't understand about predators in power. They don't survive by being careless. Vincent had spent 12 years at Nexus Digital learning exactly how to hurt people without leaving evidence, how to isolate his victims, how to make them question their own reality until they believed they deserved the treatment they were receiving. And here's what most people don't understand about family. When someone hurts your sister, when they steal her confidence and replace it with fear, when they make her believe she's not strong enough to survive in the world without compromising her integrity, you don't think about stock options or career, advancement, or what your girlfriend is going to say when you come home unemployed. You think about the promise you made at your parents' funeral, the one where you swore you'd always protect her, no matter what it cost you. So there I stood, successful by every measure society uses to define a man's worth, about to throw it all away for a principle that might destroy us both. Because sometimes, doing the right thing means losing everything you think you want to discover what you actually need. I had no idea that this decision would change not just our lives, but the lives of hundreds of women I'd never met. I had no idea that within 2 years, Vincent would be the one crying in bathrooms while facing multiple lawsuits. I had no idea that my act of professional suicide would become the foundation for a career more meaningful than anything I'd ever imagined. All I knew was that my sister needed me, and I couldn't let her face this monster alone. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the universe rewards you for doing the right thing, even when the right thing looks like the stupidest decision you've ever made. Let me take you back 6 months before that resignation letter, back when my life looked like something out of a success story magazine. I was living in a sleek downtown Seattle apartment with views of Elliott Bay, finally earning enough to pay off the student loans that had haunted me since college. My girlfriend Ren and I had been together for 3 years, and I'd already picked out the engagement ring, planning to propose on her birthday in December. 7 years at Nexus Digital had taught me that persistence pays off. I'd started as an entry-level marketing coordinator straight out of Washington State, working 60-hour weeks while watching my peers burn out and quit. But I had something they didn't have, a reason to succeed that went deeper than personal ambition. When our parents died in that car accident 4 years ago, I became more than Celeste's big brother. I became her everything. Mom and Dad had been driving home from her college graduation when a drunk driver ran a red light and changed our lives forever. In one night, I went from being a carefree 28-year-old planning his own future to being a 28-year-old responsible for his devastated 19-year-old sister's survival. Those first few years were brutal. Celeste dropped out of school, couldn't function, spent months on my couch alternating between tears and silence. I threw myself into work because someone had to pay the bills, someone had to be strong, someone had to believe we'd both make it through. Every promotion, every raise, every recognition was fuel for the promise I'd made at their funeral. I would give Celeste a life our parents would be proud of. When she finally found the strength to go back to school at 24, I was there. When she graduated with her business degree this past spring, summa cum laude with a focus on data analytics, I was in the front row crying harder than she was. For the first time since the accident, I could see our dad's stubborn determination in her eyes and our mom's brilliant smile on her face. But the job market was ruthless. Celeste sent out hundreds of applications, endured dozens of interviews, faced rejection after rejection. Each no felt like a personal attack on everything she'd overcome. I watched her confidence crumble, watched her start questioning whether she was smart enough, strong enough, worthy enough to succeed in the corporate world. That's when I made what seemed like a simple decision. I had influence at Nexus Digital. I knew department heads, had built relationships across the company. When an entry-level analyst position opened up in Vincent's team, I put in a word. Not asking for special treatment, just requesting that they give my sister a fair shot at interviewing. She earned that job on her own merit. Her interview performance was flawless, her analytical test scores were off the charts, and her presentation on market trend prediction impressed everyone in the room. Vincent himself called me the day they hired her, saying, "Your sister is exactly what we need in this department. Fresh perspective, sharp mind, hungry to prove herself." The first month was everything I'd hoped for. Celeste would text me updates throughout the day, excited about projects she was working on, proud of compliments from senior staff, energized in a way I hadn't seen since before our parents died. We started having lunch together twice a week at the cafe across from our building, and for the first time in 4 years, our conversations weren't about grief or survival or getting through another day. They were about the future. "I'm actually good at this," she told me during our second week lunch, practically glowing with pride. Vincent said my market analysis for the Morrison account was some of the most insightful work he'd seen from a junior analyst. "I think I might actually belong here." Watching her thrive felt like watching a flower bloom after a long winter. She bought new professional clothes with her first paycheck, started talking about career goals and 5-year plans, even mentioned a coworker named David she might grab coffee with. The sister I remembered from before the accident was finally coming back. But by the second month, something shifted. Our lunch conversations grew shorter. Her texts became less frequent. When I asked how things were going, she'd give me generic answers about adjusting to corporate culture and learning the ropes. The light in her eyes started dimming again. I should have paid closer attention to the warning signs. I should have trusted my instincts when she mentioned Vincent asking her to stay late for additional training or making comments about her fitting in with the team dynamic. Instead, I told myself she was just experiencing normal workplace adjustment. After all, corporate life could be overwhelming for someone fresh out of college. I had no idea that Vincent Harwick was already beginning his predatory campaign, testing boundaries, isolating his newest victim, preparing to destroy everything my sister had fought so hard to rebuild. The changes in Celeste started small, the kind of shifts you might dismiss as normal workplace stress. She stopped texting me funny observations about office life. Our lunch conversations became stilted, filled with long pauses where she'd stare at her salad instead of meeting my eyes. When I asked about specific projects or coworkers, she'd give me one-word answers and change the subject. "How's Vincent treating you?" I asked during our third-month lunch, sensing something was wrong but not understanding the depth of it yet. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. "He's fine, just demanding, high standards." But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she flinched slightly at his name. That night, I almost called her to press for details, but I stopped myself. Celeste had fought so hard to prove her independence after our parents' death. The last thing she needed was her overprotective big brother helicoptering around her first real job. The truth started coming out in fragments. During our 4th-month lunch, she mentioned Vincent requiring her to stay late for performance evaluations that seemed to focus more on her attitude than her work output. He'd started commenting on her clothing choices, suggesting she needed to dress more professionally, while simultaneously criticizing outfits that were identical to what other female employees wore. "He told me yesterday that my presentation style needs work," she said, picking at her sandwich. "Said I come across as too academic, not personable enough for client-facing work." Then he spent 20 minutes explaining how successful women in business need to be more approachable. The word approachable made my stomach clench, but Celeste rushed to defend him before I could respond. "I'm sure he's just trying to help me succeed. This is my first corporate job, and he has 12 years of experience. Maybe I am being too sensitive." That phrase haunts me now. Maybe I am being too sensitive. It's exactly what predators want. Their victims to believe that their instincts are wrong, that discomfort is a character flaw rather than a warning system. By month 5, the psychological warfare had intensified. Vincent began assigning Celeste impossible deadlines while providing unclear instructions, then publicly criticizing her when she inevitably fell short. He'd schedule mandatory one-on-one meetings in his office after most employees had left for the day, closing the door and positioning himself between Celeste and the exit. During these meetings, according to what she finally told me, he'd lean over her shoulder while reviewing her work, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne and feel his breath on her neck. He'd make comments about her personal life, asking invasive questions about her dating history and living situation. When she tried to redirect conversations back to work, he'd accuse her of being unprofessional and resistant to feedback. He said, "I need to learn how to build relationships with senior staff," she whispered to me one evening when I found her crying in her car after work. "That my success here depends on how well I connect with leadership. But Tobias, the way he looks at me when he says things like that, it doesn't feel like mentorship. It feels like something else entirely." The breaking point came during what Vincent called a performance improvement meeting on a Friday evening when the office was nearly empty. He'd been building toward this moment for months, testing boundaries, conditioning Celeste to accept increasingly inappropriate behavior as normal workplace interaction. According to Celeste, he positioned his chair directly next to hers, ostensibly to review documents on her computer screen, but his hand kept brushing against her arm, his leg pressed against hers under the desk. When she tried to move away, he blocked her path and leaned closer. "You know, Celeste," he said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a seductive whisper, "I've been watching you these past few months. You have real potential here, but potential means nothing without the right guidance. I could make sure you succeed, make sure you get the recognition you deserve." When she asked what he meant, his intentions became crystal clear. "Smart girls, like you understand that success in corporate America isn't just about what you know, it's about who you know and how willing you are to show appreciation for the people who can advance your career. I'm offering you an opportunity here." She called me at 9 that night, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. He didn't touch me, not really. But Tobias, I felt so trapped. And when I didn't respond the way he wanted, his whole demeanor changed. He said maybe I wasn't as smart as he'd thought, that maybe I wasn't ready for the responsibilities I'd been given. That's when I realized we weren't dealing with a demanding boss or workplace politics. We were dealing with a predator who had spent months systematically breaking down my sister's confidence, isolating her, and preparing her for exploitation. After that phone call, I didn't sleep for 3 days straight. I kept replaying Celeste's broken voice, the way she'd whispered, "Maybe I'm not cut out for this world," like she was admitting defeat not just about her career, but about her entire future. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw our parents' faces at her college graduation, beaming with pride at their daughter's resilience and intelligence. They would be devastated to know she was questioning her worth because of some predators and manipulation. By Monday morning, I'd made my decision. Traditional channels weren't going to work. Vincent had been playing this game for 12 years, which meant he knew exactly how to avoid leaving evidence. He'd cultivated relationships with upper management, built a reputation as someone who brought in results, and positioned himself as untouchable. Going through HR would be suicide for both of us. But everyone makes mistakes when they get comfortable, and Vincent's comfort level was about to become his downfall. I started documenting everything. Every conversation Celeste and I had about Vincent, I wrote down immediately afterward with dates and times. I researched former female employees who'd left the company abruptly, finding their LinkedIn profiles and reaching out with carefully worded messages about workplace culture and professional experiences. 3 women responded, and their stories were hauntingly similar to Celeste's. Sarah from accounting had quit 2 years ago after Vincent cornered her in the supply closet. Rachel from client services had transferred departments suddenly after Vincent started requiring her to attend strategy sessions at restaurants where he'd order multiple bottles of wine and suggest they go back to his place to continue brainstorming. Maria from HR itself had left the company entirely after filing a complaint against Vincent, only to find herself facing retaliation so severe she couldn't function at work. These women were terrified to speak publicly. Vincent had destroyed their confidence so thoroughly that they still believed years later that somehow they were to blame. But when I explained what was happening to Celeste, something shifted. Rachel agreed to provide a written statement. Sarah said she'd testify if legal action became necessary. Maria, despite her position in HR giving her the most to lose, offered to help in any way she could. Armed with their testimonies and Celeste's detailed accounts, I knew I needed Vincent to incriminate himself. That's where my 7 years of corporate relationship building became crucial. I scheduled a meeting with Vincent under the pretense of discussing a cross-departmental marketing initiative for one of his biggest clients. I've been impressed with the work your team has been doing, I told him over coffee in his office, my phone recording every word from my jacket pocket. Especially some of the junior staff. Fresh perspectives can really transform a campaign. Vincent's eyes lit up with that predatory gleam I'd learned to recognize. You're absolutely right. Take your sister, for example. Brilliant mind, but she needs guidance on how to navigate corporate relationships. These young women come in thinking talent alone will carry them, but success requires understanding how things really work. I felt sick listening to him, but I pressed forward. What do you mean by corporate relationships? Look, Tobias, you've been here long enough to understand the game. Junior employees need mentorship, and they need to show appreciation for the people who invest time in their development. Some people adapt to this reality better than others. Your sister is still learning. The way he said appreciation made my skin crawl, but I kept my voice neutral. And if they don't adapt? Vincent shrugged with practiced indifference. Then they're not a good fit for our culture. I've had to counsel several young women over the years about their attitude problems. Most of them chose to find opportunities elsewhere rather than adjust their approach. There it was. Recorded confession of his systematic harassment, delivered with the casual arrogance of someone who believed himself untouchable. That evening, I compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier. Voice recordings, written testimonies from former employees, documentation of Celeste's deteriorating performance reviews that coincided perfectly with her resistance to Vincent's advances, and a timeline showing the pattern of young women leaving his department under suspicious circumstances. I requested a meeting with CEO Jonathan Whitfield, a man I'd presented to dozens of times over the years, someone who'd personally congratulated me on my promotions and talked about my bright future with the company. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. As I walked into that conference room with my evidence, I believed I was about to save my sister's career and expose a dangerous predator. Instead, I was about to discover that corruption at Nexus Digital went far deeper than I'd ever imagined, and that doing the right thing would cost me everything I'd spent 7 years building. Jonathan Whitfield listened to my recorded conversation with Vincent in complete silence, his expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. When Vincent's voice finished confessing his systematic harassment of female employees, I expected shock, outrage, immediate action. Instead, Whitfield closed my evidence folder and leaned back in his leather chair. "This is unfortunate," he said finally, as if we were discussing a minor scheduling conflict rather than criminal behavior. Unfortunate. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jonathan, Vincent admitted to targeting vulnerable women, to forcing them out of their jobs when they wouldn't comply with his advances. We have multiple testimonies, recorded evidence, a clear pattern of abuse. Whitfield sighed like I was a naive child who didn't understand how the world worked. Tobias, I appreciate your concern for your sister, but you need to consider the bigger picture here. Vincent brings in 40% of our department revenue. His client relationships are worth millions. Your sister can find work elsewhere. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. Are you telling me that revenue matters more than protecting employees from sexual harassment? I'm telling you that business decisions require weighing all factors. Vincent's behavior, while regrettable, isn't criminal. No physical assault occurred. What you're describing sounds like miscommunication and personality conflicts that got out of hand. I stared at this man I'd respected for 7 years, watching him reframe predatory behavior as a simple misunderstanding. What about the other women? Sarah, Rachel, Maria? Are their experiences just personality conflicts too? Former employees with axes to grind aren't reliable witnesses, Tobias. And frankly, your decision to secretly record conversations with colleagues shows questionable judgment on your part. That's when I realized the fix was already in. Vincent hadn't survived 12 years of harassment complaints through luck or cleverness alone. He'd survived because the company protected him, because men like Whitfield had decided his revenue generation was worth more than women's safety and dignity. Here's what we're going to do, Whitfield continued, opening his desk drawer and pulling out a manila envelope. We're prepared to offer you a promotion to VP of Strategic Marketing, along with a 30% salary increase and accelerated stock vesting. In return, this conversation never happened. These recordings disappear, and your sister learns to adapt to our workplace culture or finds employment elsewhere. The bribe was substantial. Life-changing money that would secure my future with Ren, pay off every debt, set me up for executive-level success. All I had to do was abandon my sister to a predator and pretend corporate corruption was normal business practice. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Whitfield's friendly mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Then both you and Celeste will find yourselves unemployable in the Seattle tech industry. Vincent has friends at every major company in the region. One phone call from him, and your sister becomes a liability no one wants to hire. As for you, well, employees who make unfounded accusations against senior leadership don't typically advance their careers. I sat there for a long moment, thinking about my parents, about the promise I'd made at their funeral, about the kind of man they'd raised me to be. Then I stood up, walked to Whitfield's window, and looked down at the city streets where thousands of people were fighting their own battles against systems designed to crush them. Keep your promotion, I said, turning back to face him. And tell Vincent he picked the wrong family to mess with. Within 24 hours, I'd resigned from Nexus Digital, forfeiting my stock options and burning every bridge I'd spent 7 years building. But before I cleaned out my desk, I made copies of everything. The recordings, the testimonies, the documented pattern of harassment, evidence of the company's deliberate cover-up. I posted my story on LinkedIn with the recordings attached. I contacted local news stations, tech industry blogs, employment attorneys. I made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of company Nexus Digital was and how they treated women who refused to be victimized. The media firestorm started within hours. Nexus Digital stock dropped 30% in 2 days. Major clients pulled their contracts. Vincent was fired by Friday, not out of moral outrage, but because the public relations disaster made him a liability they could no longer afford. But corporate retaliation is real, and it's vicious. Within a week, both Celeste and I discovered we were blacklisted. Every job application was mysteriously rejected. Former colleagues stopped returning our calls. The tech industry in Seattle had effectively excommunicated us for refusing to stay silent about abuse. 6 months later, I was working part-time at a coffee shop, watching my savings evaporate while Celeste stocked shelves at a retail store. Ren had left me, unable to handle dating someone who'd destroyed his own career over office drama. We were facing eviction, drowning in bills, questioning whether standing up to Vincent had been worth losing everything. That's when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize and everything changed again. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was restocking coffee cups and trying not to think about the eviction notice on my kitchen counter. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and completely unexpected. "Is this Tobias Chen? My name is Maxine Torres, CEO of Cascade Technologies. I've been following your story for months, and I'd like to offer you and your sister positions at my company." I almost hung up thinking it was some cruel prank. But Maxine Torres was real, and her offer was genuine. She wanted me as director of ethics and workplace culture, a position she'd created specifically after watching my public battle with Nexus Digital. For Celeste, she offered a senior analyst role with guaranteed protection from harassment and a direct reporting line to Maxine herself. During our first meeting at her downtown office, Maxine revealed something that changed my entire understanding of why this opportunity existed. 5 years earlier, her 23-year-old daughter Aria had been harassed by Vincent at his previous company. Unlike Celeste, Aria hadn't had a protective big brother willing to sacrifice everything. She'd suffered in silence until the psychological damage became so severe she'd attempted suicide. I tried to fight for my daughter then, Maxine told me, her composure cracking slightly. But I was just a mid-level manager with no evidence and no allies. Vincent was untouchable, protected by the same culture of silence that almost destroyed Aria. When I saw what you did for Celeste, when I watched you choose integrity over comfort, I realized I finally had the power to make the changes I'd dreamed about for years. Cascade Technologies became the first major tech company to implement comprehensive anti-harassment protocols, anonymous reporting systems, third-party investigations, zero-tolerance policies with real teeth. Within 18 months, 12 other companies had adopted similar programs. The Chen protocols, as they became known in industry circles, set a new standard for workplace safety. 2 years later, our lives looked nothing like I could have imagined during those dark months after leaving Nexus. Celeste had flourished in an environment where her intelligence was valued without strings attached. She'd been promoted twice, was leading a team of 5 analysts, and had regained the confidence that Vincent had tried to destroy. More importantly, she'd become an advocate for other young women entering the corporate world, speaking at universities about recognizing and reporting harassment. "I used to think needing help made me weak," she told me during one of our weekly dinners. "But watching you sacrifice everything for my dignity taught me that accepting support from people who love you isn't weakness. It's wisdom." My own career had taken a direction I never expected. The ethics role had evolved into consulting work with companies across the country, helping them identify and eliminate toxic workplace cultures. I testified before congressional committees, spoken at international conferences, and written articles that were taught in business ethics courses. The work paid better than my old job and felt infinitely more meaningful. On a personal level, losing Ren had initially felt devastating, but it cleared the path for meeting Iris at a workplace harassment prevention conference in Portland. She was an employment lawyer who shared my passion for justice, understood the cost of fighting corrupt systems, and loved me not despite my principled stand, but because of it. We got engaged exactly 3 years after I'd walked out of Nexus Digital, but the most satisfying consequence was watching Vincent's complete downfall. Once my story went public, other victims found the courage to come forward. He faced 4 separate lawsuits, lost his house to legal fees, and discovered that predatory behavior has consequences when the light of public scrutiny finally reaches it. The last I heard, he was working at a mid-level position in a small firm in another state, his reputation permanently destroyed. The deeper lesson of this experience isn't about corporate politics or workplace harassment, though those issues matter enormously. It's about the difference between what looks like security and what actually creates lasting fulfillment. For 7 years, I thought success meant climbing ladders within existing systems, even when those systems were fundamentally corrupt. I learned that sometimes the universe doesn't reward you immediately for doing the right thing. Sometimes it tests your commitment by making things harder before they get better. But when you stand up for what matters most, when you choose principle over profit and love over comfort, opportunities emerge that you never could have imagined. Today, When young professionals ask me for career advice, I tell them this: your reputation isn't built by the title on your business card or the size of your salary. It's built by the choices you make when those choices cost you something. And the person you become by making hard choices to protect others is worth more than any position you'll ever hold.